Most gardeners spend hours cleaning up their garden in fall, pulling every plant, raking away every leaf, bagging every stem, and leaving the beds looking perfectly clean. And that can be a mistake, because in the process of making the garden look tidy, you may be removing the exact material your soil needs most. Then winter arrives. Rain pounds the bare soil, wind dries the surface. Nutrients can move out of the root zone, and by spring, that beautiful clean bed may feel compacted, crusty, and strangely lifeless. So this fall, instead of cleaning everything, try something different. Clean up the problems. Keep the resources. Because a smart fall cleanup is not about leaving your garden messy. It is about knowing what needs to go, what should stay, and how to turn the leftovers from this year's garden into healthier soil for next year's plants. And once you understand the difference, you may never look at a pile of fall leaves the same way again. Think about what happens in a typical garden at the end of the season. The tomatoes are finished, the beans are fading, flowers are turning brown, leaves are falling everywhere. So you start cleaning, plants get pulled out by the roots, old mulch gets removed, leaves get raked away, stems get bagged, everything goes into the trash or gets hauled somewhere else. Eventually, you're left with a beautiful rectangle of bare soil. It looks clean. But soil is not a kitchen floor. It does not need to be swept completely clean. Healthy soil is a living environment filled with bacteria, fungi, worms, insects, roots, and countless other organisms interacting with organic material. And when you expose that soil completely, you remove some of its protection. Heavy rain can hit the surface directly, breaking down soil structure and contributing to crusting or compaction. Wind can dry and erode exposed soil. Repeated freezing and thawing can stress the surface, and without organic material slowly decomposing above it, there is less food entering the soil system. Look at a forest in fall. Nobody rakes the forest floor. Leaves fall, plants die back, organic material accumulates, and decomposition gradually returns nutrients and carbon to the soil. Your vegetable garden is obviously not a forest, and some cleanup is absolutely necessary. But we can borrow one important lesson from nature. Soil generally benefits from being covered. A good fall cleanup has two jobs. Job number one is sanitation. You want to remove material that could create problems next season. That includes serious disease, pest infestations, mature weed seeds, invasive plants, and rotten produce that may attract unwanted animals or insects. Job number two is soil building. You want to keep or add safe organic material that protects the soil and eventually breaks down. Once you understand those two jobs, fall cleanup becomes much easier. Instead of asking, "How do I remove everything?" ask, "Is this material a future problem or a future resource? A diseased tomato vine? Future problem. A pile of clean, shredded maple leaves? Future resource. A weed covered in mature seeds? Problem. Healthy bean vines? Potential resource." That simple distinction can save you work while helping your soil. Now we need to talk about the most important part, because not everything should stay. Start with obviously diseased plants. If your tomatoes suffered from serious blight or another significant disease, don't chop those plants into little pieces and scatter them around the bed. Remove them. The same applies to squash, cucumbers, zucchini, or other plants with serious disease problems. Heavy powdery mildew, bacterial disease, suspicious rotting, and severely infected plant tissue should generally be treated differently from healthy garden residue. Next, remove heavily pest-infested material. If a plant is covered with pests or clearly contains overwintering pest stages, keeping that material right beside next year's crops may give you problems. Then come weeds. A young weed that never flowered can be very different from a weed holding hundreds of mature seeds. If the seed heads are mature, remove them. Otherwise, your soil building layer could become a weed planting system. Be particularly cautious with aggressive perennial and invasive weeds. Some can regenerate from pieces of roots, rhizomes, or stems. Chopping them up and distributing those pieces around your garden can make the problem worse. Finally, finally, collect rotten fruits. A forgotten tomato here or there isn't the end of the world, but piles of rotting produce can attract pests, encourage unwanted volunteers, and create unnecessary disease pressure. So remember this rule. If it is diseased, heavily pest-infested, invasive, full of mature seeds, or likely to create a sanitation problem, get it out of the bed. Being lazy about fall cleanup does not mean being careless. Now for the part most gardeners throw away too quickly. Healthy plant material, disease-free trimmings, soft green stems, seed-free spent flowers, healthy bean and pea vines, clean leaves, and untreated grass clippings can all become organic material for your garden. That brown leaf on the ground is not automatically trash. It contains carbon and nutrients that came from a living plant. When decomposers break organic material down, some of that material eventually contributes to the soil's organic matter. And organic matter is incredibly useful. It can support soil organisms, improve water management, and help create better soil structure over time. The important word here is healthy. You are not trying to recycle every single thing the garden produces. You are selecting the safe material. Imagine finishing your fall cleanup with two piles. One pile contains diseased plants, seed-filled weeds, invasive material, and other risky debris. That pile leaves the garden. The other contains healthy leaves, clean trimmings, and disease-free plants. That pile is valuable, and one of the easiest ways to use it is chop and drop. Chop and drop is almost exactly what it sounds like. Instead of pulling a healthy plant, carrying it across the yard, composting it somewhere else, and eventually carrying compost back to the bed, you cut suitable plant material into smaller pieces and allow a thin layer to remain on the soil. Why chop it? Because a whole tough stem may take a long time to decompose. Cut that same material into smaller pieces and you create more exposed surface area for decomposers to work on. You also create a flatter layer that is easier to cover with leaves or mulch. You don't need to pulverize everything. Pruners or garden shears are usually enough. Cut healthy soft material into manageable pieces and spread it loosely across the bed. Keep the layer reasonable rather than creating a wet, airless pile. Then nature starts doing the slower work. Fungi, bacteria, insects, and earthworms can gradually process that material. By spring, some may have disappeared. Some may still be visible. That's fine. Decomposition takes time. And remember the biggest chop and drop rule. Never use this method as an excuse to spread diseased plants or mature weed seeds around the garden. If you want one of the cheapest fall soil building materials available, look down. Fall leaves are incredibly useful. Leaves can cover the soil surface, soften the impact of rain, reduce erosion, help moderate moisture changes, and gradually decompose into organic material. And in many neighborhoods, people literally put them on the curb for someone to take away. But there is a trick. Shred them when possible. A few whole leaves aren't a problem, but a thick layer of certain whole leaves can mat together when wet. You can end up with something resembling soggy cardboard. Shredded leaves are easier to spread and generally break down faster. One easy method is to run a lawnmower over dry leaves, ideally with a collection bag. Suddenly, that mountain of leaves becomes a much smaller pile of shredded material. Spread it over your beds as a loose blanket. You don't need 2 feet of leaves. You simply want enough coverage to protect the soil without creating a thick, waterlogged mat. And make sure you know where your leaves came from. Avoid obviously contaminated material or leaves that have been exposed to chemicals you don't want in your vegetable beds. Otherwise, clean fall leaves are one of the best examples of turning seasonal waste into a garden resource. Once you've cleaned out the risky material and kept the useful material, look at your mulch. Fall is a great time for a mulch reset. You can use shredded leaves, clean straw, finished compost, leaf mold, or thin layers of untreated grass clippings. Think of mulch as your soil's winter blanket. It reduces direct exposure to harsh weather while creating a protected zone near the soil surface. And you can combine materials. For example, you might leave chopped healthy plant residue on the bed, add a little finished compost if you have it, then cover everything with shredded leaves. You do not need to buy bags and bags of compost every fall to do something useful for your soil. Use what your garden and yard already produce. Just avoid piling wet green grass into a thick layer. It can become slimy and compacted. Thin layers work much better. Here's another useful trick for empty areas of larger garden beds. Compost pockets. Instead of sending every safe kitchen scrap to an external compost pile, you can bury bury small amounts directly in unused areas of the garden. Dig a small hole or trench. Add modest amounts of appropriate scraps. Chop larger pieces smaller. Then cover everything completely with several inches of soil. Over the cooler months, soil organisms can gradually begin breaking that material down. Good candidates include small amounts of fruit and vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, and similar plant-based kitchen waste. But this is not an underground garbage can. Don't bury meat. Don't bury dairy. Avoid oily foods, salty cooked leftovers, and anything likely to attract rodents or other pests. And don't fill half the bed with kitchen waste. Small pockets are the idea. If animals are already a serious problem where you live, skip this technique and use a secure composting system instead. The goal is decomposition, not inviting the neighborhood wildlife to dinner. There is another way to cover soil that doesn't involve mulch at all. Grow something. Cover crops are plants grown mainly to benefit the soil rather than to produce something for your dinner plate. Depending on your climate and timing, options may include clover, rye, oats, field peas, vetch, mustard, or other locally appropriate cover crops. Their biggest advantage is simple. Living roots remain in the soil. Those roots help hold soil in place, interact with soil organisms, and can improve soil structure. Then, when the cover crop is eventually cut down or winter killed, its plant material adds organic matter back to the system. Some legumes can also work with bacteria to fix atmospheric nitrogen, although how much of that nitrogen benefits your next crop depends on how the cover crop is managed. You don't need to become a cover crop expert overnight. If you're a beginner, start by finding a cover crop recommended for your region and planting window. The basic concept is what matters. Instead of leaving an empty bed exposed all winter, keep it protected with living plants. If you remember one visual from this video, remember this. Bare soil is exposed soil. Imagine standing outside through cold wind, pounding rain, and dry weather with nothing protecting your skin. Your soil faces its own version of environmental stress. Raindrops directly strike the surface. Moisture can evaporate more quickly. Wind can carry fine particles away, and repeated weather exposure can damage surface structure. A protected soil surface behaves differently. Leaves intercept rain. Mulch reduces exposure. Plant roots help hold soil together. Organic residues create habitat and food for decomposers. So whenever you finish working on a garden bed in fall, ask yourself one question. What is covering the soil? It might be living cover crops. It might be shredded leaves. It might be straw. It might be chopped healthy plant material with mulch over it. But ideally, the answer shouldn't be nothing. Tomatoes and squash deserve special attention because these are exactly the plants where gardeners can get into trouble by leaving everything behind. Start by inspecting the plants. Were your tomatoes relatively healthy? Or were the lower leaves covered in suspicious spots and dying tissue? Did your squash simply reach the end of its life cycle? Or was it overwhelmed by mildew or serious pests? If disease or heavy pest pressure was a major problem, remove the affected plant material rather than chopping and dropping it. Do the same with cucumbers and zucchini. And don't forget the structures around the plants. Tomato cages, stakes, clips, trellises, and reusable support materials can collect soil and plant residue. Clean them before storage, especially if they were used around diseased plants. This small step can reduce the chance of carrying old plant debris directly into next season's garden. Once the risky material is gone, cover the soil with clean organic matter. That way you're practicing sanitation without leaving the bed completely exposed. Raised beds make this entire system incredibly simple. First, walk through the bed and identify unhealthy plants. Pull plants with serious disease or pest problems and remove weeds with mature seeds. Second, look at the healthy material. Cut suitable disease-free plants into smaller pieces. Third, add organic matter. If you have finished compost, spread some on the surface. If you don't, shredded leaves can still give you valuable coverage. Fourth, add your mulch layer. Use shredded leaves, clean straw, leaf mold, or another safe organic mulch. Fifth, check drainage. Raised beds still need to move excess water. Don't bury drainage openings or create a dense layer that keeps the bed waterlogged. And finally, stop digging just because it's fall. You don't automatically need to aggressively turn over the entire bed. In many situations, simply adding material to the surface and allowing organisms and weather to work on it is enough. You're preparing the bed, not renovating a construction site. Container gardeners can use the same philosophy, but you need to be more more cautious. A raised bed might hold hundreds of gallons of soil. A small pot has very little room, so filling containers with random kitchen scraps and wet plant debris is not a great idea. It can smell, mold, attract pests, and create poor growing conditions. Instead, clean containers more selectively. Remove diseased plant material. For healthy annual plants, remove the main root mass and old stems as needed. Inspect the potting mix. If you're planning to reuse it, you may be able to refresh it with finished compost, worm castings, or fresh potting mix, depending on its condition and what you're growing next. Then add a light layer of dry, shredded leaves on top if the container will remain outside, and that makes sense for your climate. Containers that held seriously diseased plants deserve extra attention. Remove infected debris and clean reusable pots before planting again. Also remember that container potting mix can lose structure over time. Organic matter helps, but it doesn't mean potting mix lasts forever without adjustment. Sometimes refreshing or partially replacing old mix is the better choice. The principle stays the same. Keep useful material when it is safe. Remove material when it creates risk. So let's put everything together. Imagine it's a cool fall afternoon. Your vegetable garden looks exhausted. Tomato vines are brown. Beans have stopped producing. Leaves are covering the lawn. Instead of attacking everything with garbage bags, start by sorting. Diseased plants come out, pest-heavy material comes out. Seed-filled weeds come out. Invasive weeds come out. Rotten fruit gets collected. Now look at what remains. Healthy plants can be chopped, clean leaves can be shredded, suitable organic material can cover the beds. You can add finished compost if you have it, refresh your mulch, or plant a cover crop if the season and climate allow. Then stop. That's the part many gardeners struggle with. Stop cleaning. Your garden does not need to look empty to be ready for winter. A layer of shredded leaves is not neglect. Healthy plant residue is not automatically mess. Mulch is not clutter. These materials are part of the biological cycle that eventually returns organic matter to soil. The perfect fall garden may actually look slightly unfinished, and that's okay, because the goal isn't to impress someone walking past your garden in November. The goal is to create better growing conditions for the plants you'll put there next spring. When warmer weather returns, pull back any mulch that hasn't decomposed where you need to sow small seeds. Remove anything that became problematic over winter. Add compost if your soil needs it, then plant. You may notice more worms. You may notice the surface is easier to work. You may notice that much of the material you left behind has seemingly disappeared. It didn't really disappear. It was processed by the living system beneath your feet. And that's the bigger lesson. Building healthier soil isn't always about buying something. Sometimes it's about stopping yourself from throwing useful things away. So this fall, don't ask how clean you can make your garden. Ask how intelligently you can clean it. Remove the disease. Remove the pests. Remove the mature weed seeds and invasive plants. Then protect the soil. Feed the decomposers. Use the leaves. Recycle the healthy plants. Keep the ground covered. Your fall garden doesn't need to be perfectly empty. It needs to be safely protected and ready to spend the next few months doing something gardeners often underestimate: building next year's soil.